Good evening, everyone. We would like to get started. So if people outside in the hallway could come in, if you'd like to come in. Again, good evening. Welcome to tonight's Local Candidates Forum. My name is Brian Gleiser. I'm president of the Shaker Library Board of Trustees. We are a co-sponsor along with the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland Shaker Chapter. Together, we're proud to co-sponsor this event because we believe that education and information are critical in helping voters to make informed decisions. This type of forum is in keeping with the mission of the Shaker Library, which is to strengthen our community and transform lives by bringing together people, information, and ideas. Tonight, you will meet the candidate for municipal judge and the candidates for city council and school board. You see the city council candidates up here already. And you'll have the opportunity to ask them questions. Thanks to Pam Beck for moderating tonight's program and to the League for co-sponsoring this opportunity for our community. A note to new voters who may be in the audience. Please note that voter registration forms are available at the main library located at the corner of Lee Road and Van Aken Boulevard and at the Bertram Woods branch, which is right across the street. And they're also online at shakerlibrary.org. These forms may be completed in the library or mailed directly to the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. We want to thank all of the candidates for participating this evening, and we want to thank you for taking advantage of this opportunity to learn about your candidates. And also, please remember to vote on November 7th, because voting is the expression of our commitment to ourselves, to one another, and to our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Sorry. My name is Holly Wang, and I'm co-chair of the Shaker Chapter of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland, along with Lynn McClelland. I want to thank the library for co-sponsoring, the middle school for hosting, Chuck Tisdale up in the booth there for making this wonderful setup work. I want to thank you all for coming and exercising your civic duty on getting to know the candidates so you can be more informed. I also want to thank the candidates for running. Our voter's guide, the one that we used to mail to you, is online now. So you want to jot this down. It's vote411.org, and you can type in your street address, and you'll pull up what your sample ballot will look like. And there'll be information on all the candidates and the issues. So it's vote411.org. However, we will print a few copies of the online voter's guide. It's a lot of pages. We'll post it on our website, probably post it on the library's website. There'll be a few copies available at the libraries if you don't have online access. A couple housekeeping things. We are videotaping this evening the whole event. It will be posted on the shakerlwv.org website. So if you know people that couldn't make it, they could certainly watch it on their own time. For high school government students, I know you're out there, you get government credit for this. So after this event, if you could come up and see me or anybody in the league that has a league name tag, we can sign your hours. For middle school students, there are middle school students here, and we're real excited to have you. Mr. Sears is out in the lobby, and he is signing what you need to have to get credit for this evening. Let's get started. Pam Beck is a longtime league member. She is retired now, but she used to do education for the deaf, and she will be our moderator this evening. Let me introduce Pam.
Thank you, Holly. I want to make sure that you all turn off your cell phones and your beepers. And it's great that this event is going to be videotaped, so you don't have to do it on your phone. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. The League does not support candidates or political parties. The League can take positions on issues that they have studied, that we have studied. It is League policy to ask that no one display their campaign buttons, signs, or literature in this room. The tables in the lobby have all those things that you can take home with you. Your program lists the names of the candidates and useful websites. So that's where you will find the video of this evening's event. We will begin with the candidates for City Council who are sitting here. We look forward to each candidate's 1.5-minute self-introduction to be followed by a timed question and answer period. Questions must be submitted in writing. They can be directed to one, several, or all of the candidates that are at the table. Cards are available, and they will be picked up by our runners for review. And for candidates and for the audience, there are 3 C's: concise, clear, and courteous. Concise, clear, and courteous. Replies by the candidates are limited to 1 minute per candidate. We will rotate the order of the candidates as to who will be answering first. We have a tight agenda, and time limits are going to be followed precisely. When a speaker's time is up, I will say, "Thank you," and we will proceed to the next speaker. The same process will be followed for the school board and for the municipal judge. At the close of the forum, informal discussion may continue out in the lobby. So if your question does not get asked, then you can use that opportunity to approach the candidate and get the answer one-on-one. So with this, we'll begin with the City Council candidates, and let me introduce them. Sarah Megenhardt, Trey Roeder, Ann Williams, and Rob Zimmerman. And we will go alphabetically, starting with Rob.
Good evening. First, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters Shaker Chapter for hosting this public forum and for the wonderful work they're doing with the Fair Districts Ohio. It's important work. It helps all of us. My name is Sarah Megenhardt, and I am running for Shaker Heights City Council because I believe in the power of local politics. I consider myself a citizen legislator. I grew up in Cleveland Heights, where our house was always open to young and old, rich and poor, black and white, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, and Jewish. There, I learned the importance of civic engagement, the art of debate, the power of diversity. I learned to speak up and to stand for something. I have made a career of helping people through nonprofit management. I started various nonprofits. One in particular became a national model, providing day labor as a living wage. I did consultant work for Lorain Community College for their workforce development and innovation centers. Most recently, I helped found Babies Need Boxes with 4 other Shaker moms, all while raising a family. My experience in nonprofit management has helped me to understand the complex issues facing a diverse community, to manage and allocate funds, and to skillfully find collaboration and compromise when needed. I've lived in Shaker Heights for 16 years, and I believe that strong communities are built on the 4 E's: equity, economy, environment, and the 4th, I would argue, would be education. In closing, I would like to help move. Okay.
Thank you.
That's where I thought it was, but you were.
I'd like to thank the League, and I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight, and I'd like to give a special shout out to the community market that just happened up the street here. That's an example of what happens when we work together. Speaking of working together, to serve on council requires being part of a team, and it also requires individual effort. As part of the team on council, I'm proud to see the work that's happened on the Van Aken district in the last 4 years, the work that's happened on environmental sustainability, and also on neighborhood revitalization, among other issues. As an individual, because I'm a member of council, we are now within weeks of opening a new teen center. And one of the young ladies, Jose, who helped us plan it, is right up front here, so you can ask her all about it when we get to talk outside here. Because I'm on council, we're saving money every year and increasing our service because we outsourced our jail to solar. More contracts are bid out because I forced that issue, and that's leading to cost reductions as well. We have a more robust business plan for the Van Aken district where we're focused on making it contribute financially to our community, and a number of streets are safer tonight. On November 7th, I asked for your vote so I can continue working on these items for you and for Shaker. And I also ask for your vote so we can work together to develop a growth plan for our future. I'm calling Shaker 2030. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. And I also wanted to thank the League and the library for sponsoring this and for all of you coming out tonight. I'm Ann Williams. I'm running for my second term on City Council because I want to continue my work with my fellow council members, city staff, and the residents to work on the issues that impact our city as a whole and our individual residents. And I just want to mention 3 areas of particular interest to me. One of them is neighborhoods. And I want to continue working to implement the 2015 Neighborhood and Housing Plan. And one example of that is working on infill housing in the Moreland neighborhood, which was hard hit by the foreclosure crisis. And in fact, there are over 80 vacant lots in Moreland. And we're just starting to work on that, and we're making progress. I also want to work on a new task force, a human relations task force that is just being formed now with residents, city staff, and council members to address some of the issues and try to figure out how we as a community can make all of our residents feel welcome and valued regardless of their status, their national origin, their race, or sexual orientation. And also how to make our community more welcoming to refugees and immigrants. And finally, sustainable Shaker. I want to continue the work on the task force, which has come up with a list of ideas on how we can make our city more resilient and work with the city on implementing some more energy-saving goals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank the League for hosting this event. I want to thank the voters of Shaker for electing me to City Council, and most importantly, I want to thank my wife Lisa, without whom I would not be on this stage. It is my view that never before in our history has city government been so important. The federal government is basically dysfunctional. State government continues to take resources from local government. In this environment, it is critical that our city government function, and I'm here to say that it is functioning and functioning well. Think about how far we've come in a few short years. The recession, the foreclosure crisis, and changes in state tax policy really hit our city hard. So we in city government, we got to work. We made hard budget choices, cut millions from our budget. We asked our residents to pay more, and they did. Now our budget is balanced, our bond rating is excellent, our fiscal situation is very strong, and we are now at a transformational moment. The Van Aken district opens next year. Our long-held dream of a downtown Shaker is about to become a reality. This is something I've spent a lot of time on as council's representative on the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals. There is so much more work to do. Next week we will be having a meeting about the variances for the food hall. You are all invited. I will also say that we will continue with sustainability policies, fixing our roads and bridges. We will lead the way for protecting our green spaces and recreational opportunities. We have a very bright future in this community, but it depends on experienced, knowledgeable local elected officials who are involved in the community and are laser focused on providing the best quality of life for all of you. I believe I've done that as a member of City Council. I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you being so timely. Okay, we'll start with the questions, and since I think we'll go to Trey to be the first
I saw that go.
response. Okay. How can the city strengthen communications with residents? How can the city and its committees be more transparent with its residents? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, in particular in this time, because this is a time where people are looking to be more involved in their government and in the decisions that we make, and that's a good thing. The public meetings, the city council meetings and our committees are public, but many people aren't aware of them, aren't aware of some of the issues that we're dealing with. So My belief is that as part of Shaker 2030, a growth plan that we will be creating, that I'd like to see us create in the future, we will have opportunities for everyone in the community to participate in that process and to put your fingerprints on what is most important to you in the future and where you think we should direct our scarce resources in the future. So we're looking at potentially in the fall of next year, based on conversations I've had with the mayor, to begin the conversation around Shaker 2030 for potentially a 2009 community-wide discussion on what our future looks like.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to say something about that? Anne?
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple of comments, just following up on Councilman Roeder's comments. A couple of things that we can do to make our city council meetings more transparent. One of the things we have just started doing is putting up audio tapes on the website so you can listen, if you'd like to the city council meetings, which I think is an important step. I think we can do a better job of involving our residents on our city committees. I would like to see that process opened up so that people can apply, submit their qualifications, and be placed on committees, because that is some of the most valuable input that we have on our committees is from our resident members.
Yes.
Sure. So all of that is absolutely correct, and I just want to emphasize one other point. The committees are so critical because we're very fortunate in this community. We have a lot of really, really smart and talented residents, and we call upon you very often. I mentioned during my opening remarks the tough choices that we had to make on city council during the fiscal crisis. Well, the mayor appointed his task force to look at potential cuts and ways we could be more efficient in government. And we were calling on people with experience in business and finance and other areas that were very, very important to us. I myself got my start in city government as a member of a committee. I was a citizen member of the Safety and Public Works Committee, and then sure enough, a couple years later, I got myself elected to city council, and I became chair of that committee. I think that's a success story that all of you can be part of, and that's the beautiful thing of Shaker. We're all in this together.
Thank you. Ms. Megenhardt?
Thank you. I would just like to build on what the rest of the people on the panel have said. I think that we can update our website and create really almost like a Facebook feed of the issues that are coming up, and not just to city council, but in front of the committees, because the committees is where the work is done. So if you know what's happening in council, by the time you come to council meeting, really the decisions have been made and the hard work happens in the committee. So I love your idea, Anne, about including more people in those committees. So I would really like to just add that for people to know what's happening on committees and be able to participate.
Okay, thank you. The next question, what 2 or 3 factors do you see as critical to achieving lasting economic growth for our city? And we'll start with Ms. Williams.
2 or 3 factors. So I think what we can do to have sustained growth is to continue to build, to make our city welcoming not only to businesses but to residents as well. I think a key component of economic development is neighborhood development and revitalization. So I think that is an important factor in it. I think we have made great strides in being more open to businesses moving into Shaker. We can continue to work on that. We have a tremendous department of economic development that's done a great job. I think we have to continue those efforts. We have to continue our efforts to market the various business places, not only Van Aken, but also along the Lee-Chagrin corridor to encourage business. And I think that's probably the best way to go about it.
Sure. So I'm going to highlight 2 factors related to the Van Aken district. And I'm not to say that these are the only 2 factors, but because I've been so involved in the project and continue to be, I really want to emphasize my answer right there. Think about this, folks. We have a $100 million development coming online next year, okay? Nothing like that has ever happened in Shaker's history. We have to do it right. And we're going to be laser focused on doing it, making sure that our economic assumptions were correct. Our tenant mix is what we had planned for. Our relationship with our developer is good. The impact on safety forces, neighborhoods. We have to get it right because it's so important. And then the other thing I want to emphasize, since there were two factors, is next year is just the first phase. There are other phases down the road, including the planned construction of an office building, which could bring very substantial revenue to the city of Shaker Heights and really work to diversify our tax base.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Megenhardt?
First, I would like to commend the city for the hard work they've done so far on the economic development plan in the Van Dyke district. And I think further, with a city like ours designed to be a bedroom community and oasis from the city, we need to be extra creative and responsive to the changing way business is done today. I would propose taking a look at, one, how we encourage businesses to move to Shaker, two, work with existing businesses, how we work with existing businesses, and three, how can we act as a catalyst, something as an incubator for new enterprises? Are there ways in which we are unintentionally hamstringing ourselves? Can we look at how we have always done business? Is there a way that we can really move ourselves into 2017 and be on the forefront of those issues?
Okay. Mr. Roeder?
Thank you. My main response to how do we grow is one that I've already given, and that is through Shaker 2030, which is specifically intended to be a growth plan, which enables us to look holistically across the schools, the city, the business community, the residents, to develop a path forward. So I'll share how I think about financial sustainability. This is a community that has many different opinions on its tax burden. We know that the tax burden is high. Some people are more comfortable with it than others. But what we uniformly agree on is that we want to make sure that money is being spent as efficiently as possible. So as chair of the 21st Century Government Task Force, we are specifically focused on finding areas where we can maintain or improve the quality of services at a lower cost. And by doing that, we continue to maintain the value that we are as a community, but we do it as a lower cost, and that makes us more attractive to others.
Thank you. And taxes is one of the things that we've got questions about. So part of it is Shaker has a high tax rate relative to neighboring communities. How can Shaker attract new residents, and how do you see the three taxing authorities working together in the future? And Mr. Zimmerman is first.
Thank you very much. So, yes, we are all very aware that our tax burden is very high. And I touched on this actually in response to the written questions, which maybe you've seen online as well. To me, it's a value proposition, plain and simple. If people feel like they are getting value for their tax dollars in Shaker Heights, whether the taxing authority is the city, the schools, or the library, they will move here and they will stay here. And if they don't, they won't. And that informs everything we do on city council. We know that. We know it is expensive to live here. So what do we do on city council? We try to spend your tax dollars as efficiently and wisely as possible. We also look for creative ways to attract new taxpayers here, including business taxpayers, and that's what the Van Dyke district is all about. We do collaborate with the schools. We had a lot of conversations with the schools about the tax levy that we just voted on this past May about what the appropriate amount was. And yes, we all know that there's going to be a community discussion that's already ongoing about the future of the library. So again, it's about all of us working together, and it's about the value proposition.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else want to address that? No. Okay. Trey?
I was waiting for Sarah.
Sorry, thank you. I had a couple.
Well, please. I'd like to highlight the three taxing authorities working together, because that's a critical point. A lot of our opportunities as a community, not only from a cost standpoint, but from a benefits standpoint, from a value standpoint, are at the intersection of the city and the schools and the library and the residents and the business community. So it's important for us to continue to find ways, such as the community market that happened earlier tonight, such as the teen center that will be opening in several weeks, to have all of these organizations work together, not only on the cost side of the equation, to look at our capacity, to look at how we're spending our money, and by capacity I mean the buildings, the facilities that we have, because we do have some open space, but also to look at the value that we're offering, because a lot of the most challenging problems and issues that we face as a community are the sorts of issues that don't neatly fit into just one of those organizations, but when we work together, we can deliver the best solutions.
Thank you. Ms. Williams?
Yes, I just wanted to add a quick comment on this, and I agree with both of my colleagues' emphasis on value in this community, because I think there is a tremendous value. But I do hear consistently about the tax burden, and I think we have to be mindful of that. And I think one thing we do need to consider on City Council is to look at the reserves that the city now holds. We have a lot of money in reserve, well above what our guidelines, our established guidelines. And I think we need to take a thoughtful look to see if there's a way that we as a city can relieve some of the tax burden to our residents. Thank you.
So Ms. Megenhardt?
I don't have much to add. I would only say that I would build on or agree with Trey when he said that the three taxing authorities need to work together. They are really three parts of a whole. How can we work together to, make sure that we are supporting one another? And because the city, our residents, we don't think of the three departments as the three taxing authorities as separate. They are all part of our important parts of our community. And just in terms of how we attract residents, I think that briefly goes back to equity, economic development, or diversity, and the environmental sustainability. With those three legs, that we are much more desirable to people as they move to the community. When they look at our city, if they see that we are strong in those areas, we just become that much more desirable.
Okay. How is Shaker currently addressing concerns over environmental issues such as lead containment, and in what ways should we do more? And you're back as number one again.
When you said environmental issues, I thought you were going to ask more about environmental sustainability. In terms of the lead paint issue, as I am not a member of City Council currently, I don't know that I have that much more information than you would. I have done some research. I know that in 2013, the Shaker did a study to see what our lead levels were in our children and our students. And they found, at least based on what I could understand, they found that all of our residents, all of the children had lead paint, and if anything, the residents in the higher income areas had slightly increased level of lead. So this is really an issue that affects all of us. We should care no matter who the person is, but it really brought home. Beyond that, I think that we could probably do more and have more information on the website and connect more closely with the county's services, what they're doing to help abate lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roeder?
Yes, thank you. Briefly, I want to build on the comment that Councilwoman Williams made, which is that the city has large cash reserves, and I think the point is very well taken, and that as we look at Shaker 2030, as we look at our plan for the future, it's important that the government not hold too much cash, lest we find a way to spend it. And we talk about, what does that mean? Do we want to invest that back into the community, or do we want it to be in some form of tax relief? That's the sort of conversation we should be having in the coming years. As far as the lead that you mentioned, my mind goes to two places. One is water, and the other is paint. So from a water standpoint, after some very well publicized incidents that happened in other cities, we have taken a look at this. We thankfully do not have the same problem here, although it is something that we closely monitor. And in terms of paint, there are some programs through the city and through the county where we look at some of the neighborhoods that are more prone to this, and also where we help individuals who might need to repaint or make their homes safer, and we do proactively monitor as well to ensure that the homes are safe.
Ms. Williams?
Building on these comments, I would echo what Councilman Roeder said as far as the city, talking about lead abatement, looking at what the city does, and we have been doing some monitoring, we will continue to do so, and looking at county services, and also providing, we have some programs that provide low interest loans to people, to residents, to do some repairs on their homes, especially in these kind kind of areas, and especially for seniors. In addition, as far as sustainability in general, again, I'd refer back to the Sustainable Shaker Task Force, which, as one of its issues, looks at questions of contamination in the community. And it's a great resource for questions like this to come, that we address, break up into subgroups, and again, rely on many of our resident members with their expertise to help guide us through. So we continue to look at these issues.
The one thing I would say about lead abatement is that it is very much a issue that involves state government, county government, and city government. And this, I said in my opening remarks that sometimes I feel almost like we're under attack by the state. And there, frankly, has not been sufficient support by the state of Ohio for lead abatement, particularly in older inner ring suburbs like Shaker Heights. And in fact, the legislature considered earlier this year, they backed away from it, even more devastating cuts towards programs geared towards lead abatement. So that's, to me, a reason why we all have to be very engaged with our members of the General Assembly to make sure that our issues are being addressed. The other thing that I would mention with regard to sustainability and lead abatement in general is what we do to maintain our housing stock. We've had to do quite a few demolitions in quite a few areas. We are now in the situation where we are actually supporting at the city level brand new housing starts, brand new houses in southern Moreland, something we've not seen since 2002. That's a good way to deal with it, by new construction environmentally safely.
Okay, another question. What practices are you planning to help seniors age in place? What new activities or programs do you envision for active seniors? And Mr. Roeder, you're first.
This is a great question. I'm actually looking for my neighbor who I had this conversation with recently. There's Harold. Yes, we have had many conversations on this. As a sidebar, I was interested to learn a few weeks ago, I wanted to know what was going on with the Shaker real estate market. And I went to the Howard Hanna office and talked to the agents there. And they shared with me that senior housing, as we've known for some time, is not only a challenge in Shaker Heights, but it's a challenge in many of the eastern suburbs of Cleveland. So this is an opportunity we have as a region. As far as our seniors are concerned, I think it's about continuing to find ways to find housing that's appropriate for seniors. And from a program standpoint, this again comes back to the intersection of our different organizations. Through schools and library and city, and particularly at the city through our rec department and some other programs that we have, what can we do to continue to grow holistic wraparound services for our very important senior community?
Ms. Williams, do you have some?
Well, I think this is one of the exciting things about this new infill housing and the Southern Moreland neighborhood. So this housing is designed to, the proposals that are coming forward, and these came out of the design competition that the city held earlier this year. It came up with some fabulous designs for these infill lots. And these homes are designed to be perfect for aging in place. A lot of them can be designed with first floor masters and bathrooms, so you can live on one floor. But it's also attractive housing to first-time buyers, young families. It goes across the board, but it's exciting to see because I keep hearing from people in Shaker who want to downsize that there's no place to go, that they're comfortable in staying into older age. So I think this is an exciting. As far as programming goes, I think we can do more through our rec department. We have a number of programs for our seniors, but I always think that there's room for improvement and increased capacity.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman?
Sure. So, yeah, that's right. The truth is, we really don't do a whole lot of senior programming here in Shaker Heights. My mom lives in Beechwood, and she's very involved in Beechwood seniors, and they do all kinds of different things for the Beechwood seniors. We really don't have a program that's quite like that, and frankly, I think that's something, a deficiency that I would like to see. I would like to see changed. But the other thing that I would mention is that where we do, I think, shine is that we do provide important supports for our seniors. We actually contract with a social worker because from time to time, our first responders occasionally encounter seniors who are in distress, health-wise, mentally, whatever the case may be. And that's why we have a social worker on call available to work with us. And like I said, our safety forces, they're on the lookout for that. And many times they've been able to intervene and help someone in need. And that's a really, really good function of city government. I think we should all be proud of.
And
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Megenhardt?
homes on the first floor, or homes with first floor masters are critical. Some of the other areas that people have just told me that are important as they age in place are connections to the city homes, right? So have to have easy access to services and amenities. Upkeep, assistance with upkeep of their home and their yards. And there is actually a movement going on across the country, and it's called the Village. And what happens is that it's essentially a group of people that come together to help one another and provide these services. They understand what services they need, they communicate with each other, and it's really like they're able to access what services they need and not take the others. And it is, provides a real community of elder people or people as they're aging in place. And I think that that would be something interesting to look at.
Okay, thank you. Shaker Heights has an aging infrastructure. Its roads and especially its sewers and water lines. Repair or replacement is costly. Resources are dear. How fast do you believe we should repair and replace them? How do you feel that cost should be financed? And that goes first to Ms. Williams.
Thank you. So there are a couple of questions there and a couple of concepts there, and I guess I would start with, obviously we do have aging infrastructure, there's sewers and roads, and I think the sooner that we can do the replacements and the repairs, the better off we are. However, we've got a capital plan, and as we look at our capital plan, it's a 10-year capital plan, and we're trying to figure out exactly when we're going to be doing the projects. Of course, as you know, with an aging house, you have things that come up suddenly, and we have to fund those. We have used a variety of funding methods to pay for these infrastructures. We've paid for it out of our funds. We've done some financing on it. I think it's going to have to continue to be a mixed use on this. And I think we're going to have to look at one of the great things about our city departments is they're very effective in getting grants. And they continue to try to get grant funding for this as well.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Sure, I completely agree with the premise of the question. We're more than a century old, and yes, we have sewers that are actually more than a century old, and they kind of function that way, especially when it rains really hard. We need to do something about that, and we are on council. We have adopted our 10-year capital plan, and it's all based on available resources and sort of grading where we have the most need, and we're moving forward with that. And you probably noticed that if you're having any difficulty getting around town, that's because of our plan. We're really moving forward. And I also want to emphasize again how we are trying to maximize and leverage resources. Shaker Boulevard, that's a state road. That's an 80-20 match, 80% from other sources from the state and so on, and 20% from the city of Shaker Heights. We actually sold our water lines a number of years ago to the city of Cleveland, and in return they're maintaining them and fixing them at a very rapid rate, more rapid than any other inner ring suburb in Cleveland with the exception of Euclid. That will make it easier for us to get around, and we'll have safer streets and sewers. Time's up.
Thank you. Ms. Megenhardt?
I just have a really quick comment, and that is directly to the sewer question. I'm not on council, so I'm not privy to all the information, so I might be wrong on this. But it does strike me that something like the magnitude of the sewer problem that we do have, and particularly the Lomond area, I'm just not sure if this is something that maybe needs to rise up a little bit to a level of more of an emergency. People are telling me they're concerned about the resale value of their home because the water and sewage does back up into their home when it rains. So again, I would welcome actually a conversation with the council members to know what their thoughts are on that.
Thank you. And
Yes, on the prior aging discussion, one note to add is that as part of our teen center discussions, we have talked about multi-generational programming, which is a wonderful way to involve all ages in the community together, and everyone wins. As far as infrastructure is concerned, of course, this is a nationwide issue. I'm the vice president of the Northeast Ohio City Council Association. We have about 40 member cities, including the city of Cleveland. And one of the things that I've learned is that we are very fortunate here in Shaker Heights in that we can't afford to even have this discussion. there are many cities in our region that are having a hard time even providing basic services. In terms of our infrastructure, as has been mentioned, Council has approved additional funding on streets and roads in the last year. And in terms of the financing, which no one has mentioned, I think it's important for us to be careful about how much debt we're getting into. We have capacity to borrow. That doesn't necessarily mean we should, because that hurts our cash flow in the future. So we need to balance that and be aware of that.
Okay, this is going to be the last question, and it's about something that most of us don't know anything about, so I thought it was a good thing to end with. Having attended multiple city council meetings this past year, I noted that a significant percentage of business is conducted on the emergency agenda, resulting in a waiver of multiple readings and discussion. This gives the appearance of backdoor agreement, rubber stamping, rushed and weakly considered decisions. What will you do to slow or stem the number of emergency agenda items and require full public venting and discussion of council decisions? And Mr. Zimmerman, it's your turn to go first.
Right. Well, I understand the question, and I must somewhat respectfully disagree with the premise. It starts with our committees. We have very active committees that look at all of our legislation before it comes to council. Sometimes it is multiple committees. Just recently, I served as the acting chair of the Finance Committee because my colleague Nancy Moore was out of town, and we had a thorough discussion of really every single item that was on the council agenda, and I reported on it. And in many cases, there were other committees, such as Safety and Public Works, that also fully vetted the issue. Many times, we do waive the rules and pass things on first reading, and sometimes even on an emergency basis. But we do not do that on issues of great public concern, where, for instance, people really want to weigh in on the issue. A perfect example would be the pit bull ban that was proposed a couple of years ago. We had multiple meetings on that, and finally we made a decision.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak about it? Mr. Roeder?
I like this question, and I agree with the premise of it, actually. On Monday night, there was a situation where something came up. It was proposed to vote on emergency, and someone in the audience raised their hand because they had something to say about it, and we weren't allowed, because of the way council works, you can comment on any agenda item at the beginning of the meeting, or you can comment on anything at the end of the meeting. But I felt like it was important to hear this person's voice. So I voted, I was the sole dissenting vote against emergency. So I'm not afraid to be that minority voice, and I think there certainly are times when we should slow down our business, give you a chance to be aware of it, give you a chance to comment on it. That's not to say that there aren't certain things that need to be moved through an emergency, but I believe that there is an opportunity, and I have a number of times voted against the emergency to make sure that we all in the community can just be aware of what we're doing and make sure that you're very comfortable with the process that we're going through.
And Ms. Williams, did you want to say something?
I would like to say that I think it is a balance. I think it does, and I understand this from the years of observing City Council as a League of Women Voter member, that it does look like you're rushing things through. And oftentimes, sometimes there are deadlines that we are trying to meet. So it's a balance of trying to get a process approved so we can apply for a grant or we can execute a contract. And again, I agree that these topics have gone through multiple committees, and so they have had extensive discussions, and I understand that the public doesn't see those discussions because they're not at those committee meetings. So I think I appreciate the question. I think we do have to be mindful of that, and I think we have to be careful about how we employ that. And again, it is a balancing.
Thank you. Ms. Megenhardt?
Thank you. I would just like to say that this really goes to my earlier point about having the committee meetings really be publicized and have the agenda actually publicized. It's very difficult to find the agenda. It's posted that day, and sometimes the meetings are at 7:30. I commend the work that they're doing on the committee meetings. They do work hard, but I do think that this question I think really goes to transparency, and I think we could do a little bit better job on that. And I was there for that meeting, and I saw that, and I agree. I think that there needs to be an opportunity for, if it's appropriate, to take a moment and hear from audience members, because the prior meeting as well, there was a gentleman in the audience that was there for a specific issue, but he didn't end up asking his question because it was too late by the time the council meeting was over. It had already been voted on. Thank you. Thank you for.
Thank you. There are a lot of cards here with questions. Many of them touched on topics that the speakers actually considered as they were speaking. So I don't feel too badly, but if you did not get your question answered, remember, you can meet the candidates out in the lobby later. So I think we should all thank these candidates for and we'll have a little 1-minute break while we bring up the school board candidates. Please take your seats so we can get started. I would like to introduce our Shaker School Board candidates, going from left to right: Lisa Cremer, Alex Dykema, Ayesha Hardaway, and Heather Weingart. So we will start with their 1.5-minute personal introduction. And we will start with Ms. Cremer.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Cremer. It's an honor to be here tonight, and I'd like to thank the women voters and the library for putting this on. Growing up, I was that girl in science class who needed to know what happened when you added things in a different order than what the direction said. I wanted to understand all the different scenarios and had to see for myself. Not much has changed. I am still interested in the why and the how of things, as well as big picture trends, and I've spent much of my life examining how research can be translated into our complicated society. At Princeton, I investigated how kids' brains work differently despite a similar autism diagnosis, and how to identify ways to best help each child succeed. When I lived on the Navajo Reservation, after receiving master's degrees in public health and social work, I studied underserved Native American populations who needed mental health services and developed strategies to reach out and provide necessary support for individuals and families. I remain committed to the power of research. I care deeply about our community and the needs of its many stakeholders. I want to bring my experiences to the board so that we can systematically work together using research and best practices to advocate for public education, to capture the kids and families that we are missing, to challenge every student to their utmost, and to support the many voices of our community. We need to make sure that we continue to measure what matters and don't get distracted in our efforts to use our resources in ways that provide rigorous, meaningful, and innovative experiences for all students.
Thank you. Mr. Dykema?
Well, good evening, and thanks to the League and the library for this forum and for everything you do for our community. I'm Alex Dykema. I'm the current president of the school board and the incumbent in this race. Along with being on the school board, I'm an attorney and a consultant who works with nonprofits helping them build their capacity. On a personal note, we moved here 12 years ago looking specifically for a community that would reflect our family and our values, and it's been a great move. 4 years ago, I ran for the school board because I believe we've got great schools and we can do better for all of our kids. Now, I want to build on the progress that we've made. I truly believe in the simple concept that every student should be able to reach their full potential and have the tools they need to have a successful life, whatever that may be. This is not a matter of taking from one and giving to another, but rather one of looking for subtle barriers, opening doors, and consciously providing systemic support to all, whether they're a high-achieving student, one who struggles, or all those in between. I also believe that with a roughly $90 million budget and the majority of our property taxes under its control, The board's fiscal stewardship is critical to Shaker and to our ability to support our programs and every one of our students into the future. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I hope I can continue to serve you on the board.
Thank you. And Ms. Hardaway?
Good evening. Many thanks to the League of Women Voters for hosting the election cycle's first forum. I count it an honor to have the opportunity to introduce myself to you all this evening. My name is Ayesha Hardaway, and for those of you who don't know me, I've been in Shaker since 1984. I came here as a young fourth grader, and for the better part of 43 years, I have lived in the Lomond, Moreland, and now the Mercer neighborhoods. I was a member of the last sixth grade class to graduate from Lomond Elementary, and I'm a proud graduate of this school on this stage and Shaker Heights High School. My mom brought us here because Shaker Heights was an inclusive community. It had excellent schools, and it provided opportunities for all of its residents. Excellence, inclusion, and opportunity, that's the promise of living in Shaker Heights in those three words. It's a promise that must be kept through our schools. Shaker schools provided me with the opportunity to go to college and on to law school. And after successfully practicing as a trial attorney, I'm now a professor at Cases Law School. I'm also a Shaker parent. We were drawn to Shaker because to raise our family here, just like my mother was. And we had the opportunity, we had other opportunities for our kids, but the right opportunity was here in Shaker. Now one of my children has graduated and is a sophomore at Washington University in St. Louis, and my son is a senior at the high school. So 2 generations of my family have taken Shaker up on its promise of excellence, inclusion, and opportunity.
Thank you. Okay. And Ms. Weingart?
Thank you. Thank you to the League and to the library for hosting us this evening. I was lucky enough to move to Shaker with my family 10 years ago, and we have 2 children who attend our Shaker schools. I have seen and experienced and believe in Shaker coming together as a community. Shaker is a city filled with passionate and involved residents. I graduated with a business degree from Michigan State University. My experience as a professional in marketing and operations in the hospitality industry taught me how to manage even the most complex budgets and personnel issues to effectively run an organization. I have a long and proven track record of engaging our community in our schools and working to provide financial stability for our schools. I have devoted 7 years in various PTO roles, including presidencies at Onaway and at Woodbury. Most recently, I was the co-president of PTO Council and the chair of the 2017 $30 million successful bond levy. I have seen firsthand the opportunities and the challenges our students face, and I am here to offer ideas and perspective as we chart a course for the future where every student has access to the opportunity and the excellent Shaker education that we can afford them. I will work with our board to engage our whole community in implementing the district's strategic plan. As a team, we will conservatively manage our school finances, we will advocate and study the pursuit of alternate funding models, and thank you. I saw it.
Okay, thank you so much. So, first question, I'm going to combine a couple of them. How do you feel about the test scores in the Shaker schools? How should we evaluate the progress of the schools? And how will you deal specifically with the root causes of the achievement gap?
Could you say with the what of the achievement gap?
The root causes of the achievement gap. And so, Mr. Dykema, you're first.
All right, so I would say I wish everyone could have come to our board work session earlier this week. We spent a lot of time looking at the test scores, both our internal test data and the state test scores. There are questions about the state test scores, but we need to use the information that we can to help guide our decisions. Our internal testing program, primarily the MAP testing program, I think is going to be able to provide a much more useful tool for us, a tool for our teachers in terms of educational input to our kids, and a tool to help us gauge how we're doing. And I think on the root causes of the achievement gap, if we're going to get all of this into a minute, I think that part of that is beginning to have those complicated conversations, look at what those barriers are, figure out what ladders we need to put in place to support all of our students so they genuinely have equal access to the opportunities in Shaker.
Thank you. And Ms. Hardaway, do you want to say anything?
Sure, I will say something. Thank you. I think, if I can remember all the parts of the question, that was compounded. I think it's important for us to recognize and stay true to the fact that Shaker does provide excellent opportunities in a number of ways for a good number of students. And that although the test scores are disappointing to all of us, I think as a community, the state test scores, that there are positive things that we should be focused on, recognizing that there is still yet a lot of work to be done. As a member of the Strategic Planning Committee, I'm confident that the course that the district is currently on will address those issues and those concerns. I think we have to be mindful when we say things like root causes, that we have to be mindful that it's important for us to do in our buildings what we have in our wherewithal to do. And I applaud the district for starting Shakers First. As an opportunity to address the achievement gap at the beginning of a student's education as they pass through the district.
Thank you.
Yes,
go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to add on to what Alex said about going to the board work session the other night, and we were able to witness the board and the administration working together to really dive deep into the MAP scores and the tools that the MAP database does provide our teachers, because one of the things I think is most important in addressing the achievement gap is providing our teachers the tools when we come up with various solutions. They need tools in the classroom to implement those solutions, otherwise it's never going to work out. So the tools that are available through the data map database is unbelievable. The other thing is that it's important, I think, as a community to pay attention to when measuring what matters comes out and the metrics that are in there, because the district has spent a long period of time developing those metrics, and it's a good comparison to our state report card. And finally, on Monday, I had the opportunity to see both our senator and 2 Ohio State Board representatives, one former, talk about the state report cards. And I think it is universally recognized that the state report card is not a useful tool for us to measure our district.
Thank you. Would you like to say?
Yes. To a certain extent, I really think that these tests are an attack on public education, and they don't really measure the depth of true learning that goes on in our schools. I have 3 young kids, and I can tell you I would not be in this district if I was not assured that they were getting excellent, high-quality education. I invite anyone who has questions on the report card to go to the schools and look around, see how the kids are learning, look at what the teachers are teaching them, sit in an IB unit. I would rather have my kids listening to an IB unit on where we are in place and time any day of the week than learning how to take a test. So, thank you.
Thank you. Can you explain the racial disparity in student discipline here at Shaker?
That's my question.
Can I explain it?
Yes. That was a question. I just read it.
So I'll say this as a criminal defense attorney currently teaching students how to represent clients. It's called systemic racism. And I know that in a lot of ways may be hard for some people to acknowledge or recognize, especially if you haven't been in those spaces. But I think that the district is doing a really good job of addressing it by starting the Restorative Practices program. I think we need to be really mindful about how we interact with our students, how we discipline them, and how we expose them to law enforcement. There's good studies out of the Schubert Center. Gabriela Celeste is a member of our community that really talks about how when teenagers have interactions with law enforcement at an early age, how we're setting them up for failure in many ways. And so I think Shaker is on course to get it right.
Thank you. So Ms. Weingart, did you want to say something?
Yes, so I think I want to touch on a little bit of what Ayesha said, in that I think it's incumbent on all of us, teachers, administrators, board members, and community members, to examine our own unconscious bias, when we take a look at that and recognize that it's there, and then again, coming back to those tools that we provide in the classroom, I want to refer back again to Monday night, where our state senator said that over 36,000 children under the age of 8 had been suspended in the last year in Ohio. And so one of the things that is going to come from our legislature soon is a ban on those suspensions. Now, there's a 3-year window that will be implemented in, but during that 3-year window, they're going to be working with the teachers to provide tools so that they can correctly implement restorative justice. And I think that's how we can address the issue.
Thank you. Would you like to say?
Just a few comments. I think that one area where we can really work on this is in elementary school and as they are transitioning to Woodbury, because I've heard that it is not as much of an issue in elementary school, but then as kids get into Woodbury and middle school, that these issues become more prevalent, and that could be a target area where we can really focus our efforts for restorative practices and making sure we are examining all of our systemic biases and training teachers in restorative practices and in just educating them really on that this is an issue that is going on in our schools, and more African American students are being disciplined than their white counterparts. Thank you.
So I would just add to what Ayesha was saying, that I think that part of this is also engaging in a real conversation. I think that the equity task force that you serve on is a really good start. It is a complicated issue, but it's one we really have to address. If we want to get to the roots of this, we're going to have to talk about uncomfortable topics. We're going to have to talk about the implicit biases that we have. We're going to have to talk about how we can address it and what tools we can provide to our staff and everybody who's working with our kids to help promote situations where we're not getting to that end point. And I think we need to start that in preschool, and I think we need to go all the way through 12th grade. And I think that that's something our entire community will need to engage in. And I actually think Shaker is a community where we can do it. We have the will. It's time to do it.
Do I have the opportunity to comment as well?
Pardon?
Do I have an opportunity to add anything?
Yeah.
I just wanted also to point out, if you're not familiar, we do have a group in the high school called SCORE. And that group of kids that you have to actually apply, and it's a fairly exclusive group of kids, and they are doing amazing work with our K through 4 kids in having those tough conversations early on. So the conversations that are tough for us are not so tough for our kids.
Okay. Thank you. What plans do you have to address the school financial capital budget? The board, the borrowing unit has almost the borrowing limit has almost been reached, and more capital improvement is needed. And that starts with Ms. Weingart.
Yes. So one of the things that is important to point out is that the levy that passed in May actually for the first time allowed for a 1.25 mil basically savings fund for our capital budget. So that's the first time that we've had that, and it will put aside $1 million a year to address our capital needs. Now, as with the city and had mentioned, we do have things that come up as an emergency, and we have to address those as they come up, and it does impact how we'll spend those dollars. And $1 million isn't a lot of money when you're talking about schools that are as old as ours, but it will help in addressing that. The second thing that I would do as a board member is I would advocate for us to explore corporate and private partnerships in a much larger degree than what we're doing now, so that we can start to offset some of the burdens that, like with a pool or a maker space.
Yes.
Yes, our resources in Shaker are precious, and we really need to do a better job consolidating our resources and having our 3 taxing authorities work together. People choose our schools for the teachers and the programs like IB, and we need to make sure we are spending our money on depth. For example, choosing initiatives like Facing History that have been proven to meet objectives and go deep and stick with them. And not only a 1-day workshop, but a 3-day workshop. Make sure that we have a real commitment to it. So my comment is that for spending money wisely, we need to focus on depth over breadth.
So focusing just on the capital part in the question, I think that it's wonderful that our community approved the recent bond levy. That is going to work to keep our students warm, safe, and dry. It is hugely appreciated, and I think that the permanent improvement levy is also going to have a significant impact. I think that it gives us a little space to be more planful. We can, and we are starting to look at what is ahead of us. What are the improvements we're going to need? What do we know is coming down in terms of repairs that we're going to have to address so that we can respond to them proactively? It's much better to replace boilers in the summer than in the middle of the winter. So to some extent, we now have the space to begin doing that. I completely agree with Heather about our need to explore and expand our outside funding potential. And those two examples, pool, auditorium, makerspace, things like that, I think are really susceptible to finding funding both from alumni and corporate donors.
And as an alum, I support the idea of tapping the resources of your extensive alumni network because we haven't done a great job of that at Shaker. There's some phenomenal graduates who love this community. They may not live here, but they want to support the community, and so we need to do a good job of tapping there in terms of outside resources. I also think it's important for us to really applaud the board at this point for, and the levy people who organized it, for having, for having the wherewithal and the presence of mind to think about creating a savings fund. I've been to a lot of block parties and I've heard a lot of criticisms about the increasing taxes in our community. And the fact that we are now in a mindset where we're thinking about saving and what we can do to make sure that we have resources to make the improvements and building and maintenance that's necessary, I think is really important. And $1 million will go some way. It may not go all the way, but it will certainly be useful, and I think it shows that we're financial stewards, responsible stewards.
Okay. Thank you. The school board and the library. Acknowledging that our community is gun-shy about increasing taxes, would you support the process of exploring a merger of the Shaker Library with the county system? A merger that would lower our real estate taxes. Okay, Ms. Cremer?
Thank you. I love our libraries. I have so many good memories of the libraries with my kids. I'm sure you all do too. I love to take them to the play and learn station, and my kids still want to go back to story time. But I also know that we live in a society where we have to think about streamlining our services because we can't have a discussion about taxes without thinking creatively about our library. So we need to find out more information about what this merger would mean and then investigate all the options. I'm a researcher, I still need more information for that.
So this is an issue that is going to be right in front of us, and I think it's one that it behooves all of us to look at too in terms of the different functions. So I've had the opportunity to go back through the statutes, and I think it's really important that our community understand that we have an autonomous library board. They are tasked with the process of reviewing the library's needs and addressing the management issues. That comes to the school board if they choose to bring a levy forward, but it's not a discretionary vote. The school board, by statute, just passes that vote through to the voters, and we have the discussion that we should have. I applaud the library board for being willing to come to our Finance and Audit Committee, to have a conversation with us, to share information with us, and to provide that educational forum. But I do think that the governance roles are really important for all of us to keep in mind as well.
So I agree with the governance rules and making sure that we are clear on whose role it is to do what at what time. But I also think it's really important for us to, as a community, to kind of broaden our approach on how we think about the library. We're talking a lot about burden, and I think that there are some of us in the community who think about it as value. And so we need to be balanced and thoughtful about understanding that it's an asset and it adds value in some ways, and then to the extent that it is in fact a cost, there are costs associated, which we may call burden. How do we balance those, and how do we decide as a community, right, what's more important to us? I'm looking forward to that conversation. I think that all libraries, regardless of who owns them, add great value, and we, Shaker being the 17th most educated community in the country, right, needs to have quality library services. So I hope we're going to be prepared for that discussion when it comes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Weingart?
Yes, so I'm again going to piggyback on the fact that the library is an autonomous board. I had the privilege of meeting with a couple of the board members and the director of the library and educating myself on the issue. And I feel for the board because it's a double-edged sword. As a board member or a prospective elected board member, you're really, your goal is to safeguard the future of the community and to protect Shaker. And so when you think about that and the treasure that the library is to the community and how important it is to our community, you have to weigh that with also the costs that are associated with whether or not we merge or not. I also think that it's misleading to the community and to the Cuyahoga Community Library if we were to issue a letter of intent, the library board was to issue a letter of intent saying that they wanted to go further when they really don't want to go further, they just want to find out more information. So I do feel for the board. I think what I would do in their position is I would put the issue to a vote and let the community decide whether or not they are willing to bear increased taxes and then go from there.
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Dykema is going to be first on this. With the disparate resources of the PTOs of the elementary schools, there are significant inequities in enrichment opportunities. How do you think the inequities among elementary schools should be addressed?
It's a really good question. I think that's a challenging question if we're looking just at the PTO funding. I think the district has an obligation to be looking at, again, what are our kids, what are their needs? How can we make sure that every child in our district's needs are being met and allocating resources along those lines? In terms of PTOs and PTO fundraising, I think one of the challenges is people tend to want to raise money for their school, where their child is. And so you get that conflict in there. I don't have an instant answer for that in terms of the PTO fundraising, but I think it's a very good question.
Ms. Hardaway?
It's been a long time since I've been in an elementary school. Well, since I've had a kid in an elementary school. And to the extent, though, that there are inequities that exist in the PTO funding, right, as a member of the Equity Task Force, I think that's something that we should be looking at and being thoughtful about. How do we make sure that the students that are in schools that are maybe not funded as well as other schools still have the same opportunity, resources, and support? And so I'm looking forward to that. I think all of this is a part of that longer, hard conversation that we have to be willing to have, willing to address, recognizing that our common interest is making sure that the children, right, have everything that they need to be successful in life.
Yeah, this is an ongoing conversation at all the PTO tables at all of our 8 buildings. I can tell you that from experience in 3 of our buildings sitting at those tables. And there's not a person in that room that doesn't bring that conversation to the table every time we sit down. I can tell you from a council standpoint, having that experience, there's a couple of things that I think we can address from a council standpoint. One of the things that was implemented the year before I took over as president was a $5 donation on Pay For It. And before that, we virtually stopped fundraising from a council level because people in schools were doing it at an individual level. We implemented that, and in 1 year, we raised $5,000. And the council's money is to be shared across units for enrichment programs for all of them.
Thank you.
So I am on the PTO at Lomond, so I feel this issue. I have friends in all other elementary schools, and as a whole, our budget for the PTO at Lomond is the amount that is raised in one event at some of the other elementary schools. And our school has 43% free and reduced lunch at Lomond, and that is 10% more than the district average. So I would love if maybe we could, even as PTO leaders, we could learn from the other PTO leaders in the other schools. Maybe we could have a meeting. I'm just looking for ways where we can get more resources to our schools that need it the most.
Okay. This is going to start with Ms. Hardaway. We have a couple of questions about non-college bound and students who will pursue non-traditional lives after high school. What does Shaker have and what does Shaker need to provide?
As a foundational measure, I think we need to start thinking differently about what success looks like. We talk a lot about academic success and whose kid is getting what recognition in terms of going on to college, scholarships and the like, but we need to broaden our understanding of awards, I think, in a lot of ways, and making those students who have different passions and have different outlooks on how they'll succeed in life feel welcome and engaged in our spaces. And so I'm hopeful that as we think about even equity in our buildings and closing the achievement gap, that we will find ways to connect students who are not on the traditional path of excellence in Shaker, but nonetheless, certainly it's in our interest for them to succeed in life and be able to feed themselves when they graduate from high school, right? And so thinking about how we connect them with mentors.
Thank you. Ms. Weingart?
So this question actually hits at something near and dear to my heart. I've had the pleasure of the last probably 6 to 8 months working with a group of parents who is actively working with the district and the foundation to put together a makerspace initiative in our K-4 middle school and high school. They have spent time researching these spaces all around our surrounding communities. And if you're not familiar, a makerspace is an opportunity to grow entrepreneurship, hands-on experiences. It really engages kids who might not be engaged by the traditional paths. I think with the progress that we have made with this group in the last 6 to 8 months, you will see an outcome in the next year. The foundation is on board. They're talking about an innovation fund. We really have made some significant progress there, and I think that's one of the key ways that Shaker can address this.
Thank you.
So thank you. Just tying into what Heather was saying, I think the 21st century or next century jobs really are going to be robotics and STEM, STEAM driven. And if we can focus our efforts on science, technology, and implementing that and integrating it into the IB curriculum, that is where we can really get ahead of this, because the IB curriculum and STEM science work really well together. They're both inquiry-based. So if we can just kind of build our science in the IB curriculum, I think we can help address some of these non-traditional students and help having other paths that are not just college, AP, some vocational type maker spaces would be a really good idea.
I would build off of all that. I think the Makerspace initiative is very exciting. I also think that we do need to address the fact that not all of our kids are going to college, just like not all of our kids going to college are going to Harvard. There are a lot of good outcomes for children to become adults, to have successful lives, and we should really be focused on providing those tools. You can be a welder and make a very good living here. That's just a fine choice if that's the direction that fits for you. And we should be providing those resources. Now, we are part of the Tri-Heights Consortium, and we will have access to Cleveland Heights' resources, which would be wonderful. But we also need to work in-house on making sure that we are encouraging kids to follow their passion and giving them the tools to be successful in achieving that.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with Ms. Weingart. Shaker Schools recently won voter approval for bonds to accomplish district-wide repairs and maintenance of its buildings, postponing a substantial project to replace or repair the middle school. What are your plans for this building?
What are my plans for the middle school?
Yes.
You do air conditioning?
So as I mentioned, I actually chaired that campaign for the $30 million bond issue. When I first signed on to chair that, I actually signed on thinking that we were going to try for $55 million in a new middle school, and I was a part of the process of talking through that and working with the board and the community and making the final, when the board made the final decision to go for the $30 million. So what it really comes down to is my plans for the building, of course, is if I were elected, would depend on working with the team, but I think that this building does need to be replaced. However, we need to do a better job of communicating to our community at large, to the 75% of our community that doesn't have children in our schools currently, and talking about what our plans are. And that education is a long-term plan. I'm talking about 5 years worth of having people in the schools once or twice a year, reaching out to them, to our seniors and to our parents with preschoolers and inviting them to events. And I'm talking about communicating with them through quarterly town hall meetings. So that's what I would do with the building.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Cremer.
So this was one of our questions, so you can read my answer online, but I'll just read a part of it. People choose Shaker schools really for the excellent extracurricular programs, IB, and opportunities that the teachers who provide these options. We just got this bond levy passed. Now we need to have a clear plan moving forward that addresses the needs of the physical structures, but also focuses on spending money in the buildings. And as I said before, depth over breadth. We need to make sure that we are spending money on the people and the resources that will help our students learn better.
So I have to say that the bond levy vote was a very challenging vote. That was a hard decision for the school board. I think it was the right decision at the time for a lot of the reasons that Heather mentioned. I don't think that we have done an adequate job communicating to the community. I also think that there's an opportunity to leverage private funding. And I don't think we were in a place quite to do that. I think that this building has educational challenges in it. So that we should be addressing it, we should be talking about it. It should also be part of the conversation that we have as a community about how we're going to handle enrollment trends. What are we looking at down the line? What is our long-term master plan? It has to be part of all of that, and then I think we will need to come back to the voters if that's the direction we choose to do. But there are pieces that need to get filled in, and I'm very hopeful that we can fill them in and get a really exciting project put together. But it will take time and communication.
So I agree that a detailed discussion needs to take place, but most importantly, I also think that on the communication end, right, there is a levy in place and there are going to be improvements made. And I think it's important for us as a community and those who are eventually in place to lead on the board to think about how we are giving periodic updates on the improvements that are made with the current money that we all are spending, right, or contributing, and then what existing needs still exist, are there, right, existing needs that exist redundant, so that the community is not caught off guard and completely unaware when it's time to make plans for what needs to be done, that we could be fully informed and engaged in the process.
Okay, thank you. This is going to be the last question, and it's going to be sort of open-ended, and how you deal with issues that City Council doesn't have to deal with. And so there's been questions regarding transportation, changing the transportation, changing the school day so that the younger children go earlier and the teens can sleep in later, transgender issues, and whether it's appropriate to have students required to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So my question is, how are you, as a school board member, going to approach tough issues? And we'll start with Ms. Cremer.
Thank you. So I will just take this as a broad question. How are we going to approach tough issues? I think we really need to be proactive. And that means making sure that all the relevant stakeholders are actively involved. And if we are making a change is wonderful if we can be excited about that. And the way to get people excited is to communicate. So if we can get a plan going and communicate to people, that would be great. So just a bit on late start, that is an issue. I understand the science, I'm a scientist, and these decisions do not take place in a vacuum. So we would have to really think about all the other cascading effects that would happen, and it's an equity issue as well, because there are kids whose parents work in other communities, so if they are going to school 15 minutes, 30 minutes later, it's going to impact a lot of other things, also late and away games. As for transgender students, that is an issue where I think that's up and coming, that the school board will have to work on and come up with a policy, and I would like that policy to extend to all schools, down to elementary schools too, because kids younger are having...
Thank you.
So I think one of the questions is, how do you get the information, how do you get the right answers, and what's the role of the board in it? So going from the back forward to what Lisa was saying, the transgender issue, our non-discrimination policy historically just addressed gender. It didn't include sexual orientation, gender identity. There's a role for the board. We've changed that. It now does. It should. And that needs to trickle down in how we approach things. I think on a lot of these issues, they are complicated, and there is direction. We need to be a conduit for community information coming into us and out of us, and we need to remember that we have experts in all of our buildings, teaching our children and running our buildings, who can provide us input and direction on those topics.
Thank you. Ms. Hardaway?
Yeah, so on delayed starts for teenagers. I think it's important for us to recognize that there's still a lot of discussion and science that needs to be evaluated for that, right? I'm all in favor of doing what's best for the health and wellness of our kids. I also think that once we are clear on the science, there are a couple of districts who have actually started late start times this school year in Ohio, two in Youngstown in particular, and I think it's important for us to be mindful of that, maybe in communication with them, to learn what we can from them about their process. But we also need to be having communications with our community, right? Because it will have intended and some unintended consequences for everyone in this room and other folks not here, right? So we need to be clear on that. As it relates to the pledge, the U.S. Supreme Court says that students cannot be compelled to recite the pledge. So we should all know that.
And all of our students should know that.
So I'm going to take the broad approach to this question because while I would like to discuss in depth each one of those questions, it's a pretty heavy question. But we have time outside afterwards. Here's a really succinct, short answer for you. Research, communication, and consequences. So when it comes to these kinds of issues, I think it's extremely important that we take a look at what our neighboring districts are doing, what's happening on a state level and a federal level, and we also engage our community. And that goes to the topic of communication. We need to have open forums. Some of you may have seen yesterday, I was on Facebook Live talking about different questions that you may have had. We need to have transparency and have those kind of open conversations. And the third thing is the consequences. We need to be very cognizant of any decision that's made at the building level when it's with the superintendent or the teacher's responsibility or the board's responsibility of the unintended, as Ayesha said, unintended and intended consequences of those decisions.
Thank you. And so everyone got a chance, right? Okay, so that's the conclusion. I want to tell you, I am so impressed with this audience for the questions that they provided. Again, I have a whole stack of questions up here. So if yours didn't get answered, meet the candidates in the back. We'll take a little bit of break as these folks leave and Judge KJ Montgomery comes up, and let's give them a KJ Montgomery has a minute and a half to introduce herself, and then if you have questions, we'll give her a minute each for those questions. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and I won't keep you too long because I know you have lots of questions. I am running unopposed for this, my 5th and final term as your judge of your municipal court because the Supreme Court says I will, quote, age out. That means I will be 70 and I can't run anymore. I've been here since 1978, raised 2 kids through this school system, and have lived in 3 different locations in Shaker. We have a single judge court. Our single judge court handles about 12,000 cases a year for 5 different cities, including Shaker. That includes Beechwood, University Heights, Pepper Pike, and Hunting Valley. And we hear only adult cases. With reference to what we do, we handle mental health, we handle first offenders programs, we handle heroin addiction, we handle domestic violence, and in those capacities I have served on any number of committees, and I know there is a website that you can go to read about work that I've been able to do. I would suggest that you look there. I will tell you at this point, I am sort of the grande dame of all the municipal courts. I am the municipal court liaison for the Northern Ohio Municipal Judges Association. So that means I sit with your county executive, I sit with Common Pleas Court, and I sit with lots of area agencies in how we use our funding and how we do our various programs and how we might better improve the service that we deliver in the criminal justice system. So with that, I would just ask you any questions you might have for me, or if you prefer to stampede out and talk to all those amazing candidates, I would understand. Pam's going to ask me the question.
What are your thoughts on the practice of charging fees that are onerous to many defendants?
So right now we're in the crosshairs of a lot of things. It used to be that municipal courts were considered cash cows, and our funds that we raise as fines and costs go to, first, the city of Shaker Heights to support what our building, our lights, our operations cost, and then they come from all the other municipalities in the form of fines, and they go back to those municipalities for their general funds. So the cost of everything we do, if it is not borne by the defendants, or if you will, users of the courts, it is borne by the taxpayers through their property income taxes, primarily through their income taxes. This is a very difficult issue that we've been looking at, in that you don't want to unduly punish those who are economically deprived, and yet you have to look at other ways to make them still make amends for their crimes without it being monetary. And we do that every day through community service, through various programs where they might contribute in a non-monetary fashion.
How can the municipal court make Shaker a welcoming place for immigrants?
Well, we just got a new rights form from the Supreme Court of Ohio today, and we said, where's the one that's in Spanish? So we have an opportunity through our Supreme Court to have free access to interpreters and free access to attorneys that we may appoint to help individuals who might not be familiar with the justice system or the process in our various community to at least communicate in a meaningful way and be represented in a meaningful way through these processes. Many of our population that is not so familiar is also not familiar with laws, whether it be traditional ways of households, raising children, things like corporal punishment. We deal with a multitude of people who are coming to this country in a way that they need to understand our laws, but not have them unduly impact them. So I think education is a huge component, and with the Supreme Court's help, we are getting to reach more of them now.
Do you have any concerns with the moving of the jail to Solon?
The judge only sentences people to jail. So Pepper Pike's got to decide where they're going to put their folks, just like University Heights does, and Shaker chose to put their people at Solon. Unfortunately, because of electronics and IT, and people are much smarter than me, we video arraign and speak with those defendants live TV, like Skyping, through video arraignment. So the only issue we have had with Solon is getting our public defenders to run from our court out to Solon to visit their defendants and then run back in order to represent them here in time. There's one other aspect, and that is in the court function. But the city of Shaker Heights rents a block of cells. If you rent a block of cells, you may not nearly be so concerned about who's sitting in them and how long, because you own the space. So we as judges read that jail list from all 5 cities every day to make sure people are not being unduly kept in one jail, in one cage, as they say, versus another.
Would you please talk about the heroin epidemic and its impact on our court?
It's the most scary epidemic we've had when it comes to the drug community. And the reason is because once you have impacted these adults who are addicted, and they have tried to make a change. I have an alcoholic in my family. If my alcoholic goes off the wagon, he's going to go on a binger. I'm going to get him back. A heroin addict, once they decide that they understand the dangers of it and they try to recover, and they relapse, they're going to die. And Rob knows this as well as I do. The heroin epidemic has brought a new, very realistic trouble. I have had defendants from Beechwood that I have left sit in jail for 5.5 weeks because they were totally detoxed. And we couldn't find a bed for them, and we knew if they walked out and used, they would be dead. So heroin has presented an enormous problem that we never faced before when it comes to relapse.
Any more questions?
Seems so easy.
I look forward to you. I want to say this to you. The court is your court. We are open to the public. Lots of interesting stuff goes on there, so please don't be a stranger. Unless you're a defendant.
Thank you so much.
Unless you're a